Welcome to the Feminine Frequency, a podcast designed to awaken your feminine energy, elevate your confidence, and embody your authentic expression. I'm your host, Amy Natalie, women's empowerment coach, feminine embodiment guide, and author of The Feminine Way. Each week, you'll receive a new episode filled with feminine wisdom, inspiration, and practical tools to remind you of the power that already lives inside of you. Make sure to hit subscribe so that you don't miss an episode, and go to the link below this video to download your free Empowered Feminine Morning Ritual. Ready to dive in? Let's do this, sister. Hello, Leola, and welcome to the Feminine Frequency. I am so excited to connect with you today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's such a blessing, such a pleasure.
Yeah, you are like one of my favorite people to follow online, and I just really love your embodiment and the work that you do in the world. So it really is such a gift to have you here. And I know that we're going to have a lot of fun because I feel like you bring that essence to some really like deep and important conversations, but you bring that like pleasure and magic to it. So that's what we're here for today.
Yeah, thanks for the kind words. It's definitely a playful perspective from my end, for sure.
Yeah, I love that. Sometimes I need that reminder because I can get into that like, yeah, more serious mode. So it's really good. And I think that's also, part of your essence as a, tantra teacher, and bringing in the aspect of like pleasure along with like the darker parts that we get to look at, the shadowy parts. So I want to start today by asking you, what is something right now in your life that's bringing you a lot of pleasure?
Such a good question. I feel that what's bringing me a lot of pleasure right now is community. I've been in Austin now for about a little over 2 years. I met my husband here. I've met some of my best friends here, and just this constant like flow of love. I've never had something like this in my life. In the first year in a new place, you're still getting settled and forging those relationships. But now there's just this new layer of depth that I'm really, really loving. And being able to facilitate in that, but also receive from it, is such a gift.
Yeah, such a powerful community there. And I'm excited for you to be dropping in deeper. Like that's where the real, like the juiciness comes, is where that intimacy and that depth comes in, which I know is a lot of what Tantra is about, is creating more intimacy with life, with ourselves, with our partners, with people. So I'd love to go there and really kind of open the door to the world of Tantra for our listeners who maybe are new to Tantra. You have your own podcast, Talk Tantra to Me, which I was on as a guest. And I feel like it is kind of like a taboo, somewhat secret. More people are finding out about it. And I feel like we are I know we're in such a like pleasure revolution right now, and so many women are awakening to their desires. So yeah, let's start there in the realm of like, what is Tantra? And yeah, bring us there.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about Tantra is that it means so many different things to so many different people. So I'm going to share a more broad context and then also what it means to me specifically. It is a lineage that has been hypersexualized, especially in the Western world, which I don't think is inherently a bad thing. I think that it's actually makes a lot of sense, because that's the part of ourselves that so many of us have been, conditioned to be afraid of or shameful of, or, have trauma around. And so it makes sense that a lot of us would use this specific modality, because it is one of the only modalities that I've seen that is really holistic and inclusive of, all parts of life, including sexuality. That being said, Tantra is a Sanskrit word, and it's actually basically two words put together. So tan is to expand, and tra is to liberate. So under that definition, Tantra is a modality, a way of being, a lifestyle that is meant to be expansive and liberating. And the cool thing about that definition is that what is expansive and liberating to one person is going to be very different to the next person. So a lot of my work revolves around helping people find where is the space for expansion and liberation for you? Where are you, contracting? Where are there blocks in your energetic system? Where is there some shadow work that can liberate you? Things like that. I will also say that a lot of my work also revolves around shamanic sexuality, and both Tantra and shamanic sexuality have this foundational, understanding that there's a spiritual world, there's a physical world, and there's an energy that connects them, and that is procreative and sexual. And how do we, heal our relationship to this energy that brought us into the world? Like, it's so funny that so many people are so afraid to talk about sex and what they want in bed, and like even to know for themselves their desires and what turns them on, when in reality, like, this is the energy that created me, it created you, it created every listener, it created my dog, all the plants in my house, every piece of food that I eat. A lot of the clothes that I wear are made from a procreative sexual interaction or energy. So when we reclaim that energy, we reclaim ourselves. Like, there's just so much power there that is untapped.
Yeah, I'm so curious about your journey. If you grew up in like a sex positive household, like did you have, this from a young age, this connection to this sexual energy? Like walk us to like where you were before like your sexual liberation.
Yeah, I did not grow up in a sex positive community house. And I think that that's what makes me really good at what I do, is because I've been through the journey to the other side. I grew up in the Midwest in a small town in Missouri. I'm very conservative, quite religious. My parents weren't like totally, like sex, like they kind of were like, let's not talk about it. And then when they did, it was like really, really awkward and really, really fear based. Like, if you have sex, you'll get pregnant and die. Like the Mean Girls sort of, like, I don't know if people have seen that. Probably everyone's seen Mean Girls, right? That was kind of the vibe. And that's what my sex education was like in general. And I didn't really get it. Like, I was like, I feel like there's something more here. And that kind of led me into a space of being really reckless, because I didn't feel like I was getting the correct information. So I was like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to figure this out myself, unconsciously as well. And so I put myself in a lot of dangerous situations. I experienced lots of non-consensual sexual experiences, all kinds of things, both, like in my teenage years, but also even in the Tantra space. So it's also really important to be aware of the integrity of the people that you are, working with in the space. But yeah, so I had just built up all of the sexual trauma, both from my education around sexuality, and then also just like going out and exploring as a young person without a lot of tools, and just learning the hard way. And so in my early 20s, I started to, begin my spiritual journey. And with that, I was doing yoga and I was meditating, and it was helping. And I was doing like the affirmations, but it wasn't getting to the root. Like, there was something that just wasn't being touched. And then I had a lover who had previously dated a tantrika, and he really opened my eyes to like a different way of making love. And that's how it is for a lot of us. When we get into Tantra, it's like for the sex tricks. We're like, oh, cool, like this is nice. And then what ends up happening is you find out, like, you start to uncover all of this baggage and all of your childhood wounds and like your abandonment shit and like all of the stuff. And so there was like a pretty intense period for like 3 or 4 years where I was really just processing a lot of that. And doing just a lot of study around Tantra and other, embodiment sort of practices, nervous system regulation, those sorts of things. And my whole life changed. Like, it wasn't just my sex changed. It was, I healed my relationship to my parents. I started to have more deep friendships. My work changed. I started to just live more in alignment with my purpose and my drive and my love. And then I started to make more money, and I started to be able to buy nice things and just take care of myself like I never could before. And people noticed and were like, what are you doing? Like, you've changed a lot. You've come a long way. from this small town Missouri girl really quickly. And then I started to share and kind of organically began teaching about it. And then I had one specific mentor that really was like, you need to do this professionally. And it was that paired with like a few other sort of light bulb moments, which I can get into, but that was kind of how I got here.
Yeah. Oh my God. You're so living in your dharma. And I love hearing, like, yeah, the journey that you've been on from a place of, yeah, I've been through a lot of shit. Like, I've been through a lot specifically in this area around your sexuality. And that is part of what makes you, an embodied teacher. And I want to speak a little bit to this aspect that is around kind of like the shadowy side of sexuality, and especially even as women, because most of my listeners are women, and kind of talking to whether it's like the wounded feminine aspect or even these like shadow aspects of our own sexuality that we have shame around. And I want to go there because I feel like it's fun to talk about orgasms, and it's fun to talk about pleasure and like all of the manifestation that comes from that, and it's so real, but we can't talk about that without also talking about this other aspect, which is like the duality that inherently exists when it comes to pleasure and sexuality. So yeah, where do you want to take us on that journey?
Yeah. So I love to start by just differentiating between light feminine, dark feminine, shadow feminine. So light feminine is like the mother, the maiden, the virgin, the piece that society is the most likely to accept is like the light feminine. The dark feminine is the sexually embodied woman. She's the oracle. She's very primal, intuitive, instinctive. Like she's very connected to the earth and to her body and to herself. And then there's the shadow feminine, and there's shadow in the light and there's shadow in the dark. And God is in the light and the dark. We've been conditioned to be really afraid of these darker elements of the feminine. And it's my belief because there's a lot of power there and a lot of sovereignty, and have sovereign, powerful women is a threat to the powers that be. But she's not shadow. She's just dark. And there's lots of, again, power in the dark. It's where the, baby is in the womb, the seed is in the soil, about to sprout, the caterpillar and the chrysalis. But the shadow in the light feminine is actually very glorified in our society as well. She's the one that is people pleasing. She's the one that's going to martyr herself. She's going to put everyone's needs above herself. And it creates, lots of trauma for the people in her life as well. And also is just very disempowering for her. But that's the shadow of the light. And then in the dark, there's the shadow of like the seductress that is wanting to gain something from like a maleficent place. Like there's one thing to be like in your sexually embodied energy and to be a muse, to be inspiring like the greater good for the world or for yourself and for another. And it's a completely different energy when you're like, I want to get things. And I don't think that there's anything inherently wrong with wanting to be in a takey energy. It's about consenting to that and being in authenticity with that energy as well. And then also, with the dark feminine in the shadow is the, witch that is like the dark witch. She's like doing magic for, evil reasons, right? And so I just wanted to start by kind of differentiating between those pieces. I'm curious where you want to go from here, if you have anything to add or questions.
Yeah, I think it's so brilliant and so important for us to see that even in like the light, almost like purity culture, like that maiden and that, the maybe the light priestess that you want to see, where it's like, oh, like there is a shadow to that aspect too. And it's not all this like glorified aspect of like doing what society wants you to do, essentially. But I feel like I want to highlight what you shared about the dark feminine in the sense of like wanting to get something. And, these shadowy aspects, I want to just highlight that these are from like our unconscious mind. Like we're usually
Mm-hmm.
not even aware until we eventually are that we may be seeking validation or love or our self-worth. We want other people to think that we're beautiful and that we're sexy or that we're desirable. And so there are these unconscious ways that we go about doing that. And I think when we can shine a light on those and not make that part of yourself wrong, like just really be like, yeah, that is part of me, and bring that to the surface, that's when we can start to heal it and integrate it. And something that I've seen for myself, even, online, and my partner has shared this with me, is he was like, it's so interesting that you post, photos of yourself that are, very embodied and revealing essentially, but you don't have like creepers on your page. You don't have people like writing all this like weird shit. And I'm like, yeah, that's because the energy that I'm coming from as well. It's
Mm.
like, I'm not asking for that. That's not the purpose or the intention or the energy in which I'm sharing it. Like, I'm sharing from a place of giving other women permission to be fully expressed. I'm sharing from that place of empowerment. And it's not to say that I can't ever get a creepy comment, but it is different than when you look at, some profiles online that are, have OnlyFans or whatever, where they're sharing their bodies, and there's nothing, I'm not shaming that area either. It's just a totally different energetic that it's coming from. And I know you share a lot, just like really, I love how you share like nudity and how you share like normalizing it, and that it doesn't have to be this hypersexualized thing. And so I wanted you to talk about that and what your experience has been.
Yeah, absolutely. Nudity is not inherently sexual, and it's my belief that a lot of the sexualization is actually the viewer. I mean, it depends. It's also very much, as you said, it's about the way you're being and your intention. And there's nothing wrong with being like, I want to be sexual and post that online. And I think that there's actually a lot of healing in the OnlyFans space with women taking, in the past with porn, it was like women were paid $500 and a dude took like all of the money that was actually made from that film. Whereas now with OnlyFans, it's going directly to the creators. And there's lots of really conscious creators on OnlyFans as well. There's tantric OnlyFans creators. There's lots of really incredible stuff. And I mean, I think that again, in every space, there's shadow and light. And in porn, there's a whole bunch of shadow, but there's also lots of possibility for education and learning and being inspired. And it's something that I even recommend, going at it from that intention and in a conscious way. But yeah, nudity is not inherently sexual. This body has done so many things, and like 99.9% of the time, it's actually not having sex. And when we're able to be in our naked bodies and feel comfortable and feel safe, there's lots of healing that occurs and also lots of empowerment that occurs. And that's a big piece of my work and something that I really empower or encourage other people to do, being really comfortable. And it doesn't necessarily mean you need to go out and post naked photos on Instagram or OnlyFans or go to a nude beach or anything. It's just like even being naked in your home by yourself and just getting comfortable, with that energy, doing something like, yoni gazing. Have you ever really looked at your pussy? Things like that can be incredibly empowering and healing for stepping into the full body.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And maybe we can even go there, because I know that you teach about a lot of different realms of sexuality, and one of them is women's pleasure and orgasm. And I feel like that's something that so many women have shame around, or they feel disconnected from, like disconnected from their body. They feel they don't even really know what brings them pleasure. So let's talk a little bit about that, yoni gazing, other practices or ways that women can start to be more connected to their own pleasure.
Yeah, there's so many different things, and it's also really important to be in alignment with the nervous system as you are bringing in these practices, because what we don't want to do is re-trigger and re-traumatize and then bring a contraction. So it's really important with these practices to go really, really slow. There's lots of amazing bodywork practitioners out there that I recommend in the tantric world, but I always recommend just starting with yourself. Um, you know, Something as simple as like, we can talk about like the yoni gazing. I wouldn't maybe start with, going directly into yoni
Yeah.
gazing. Maybe I would start with just standing in front of the mirror fully clothed, seeing how that feels to really look at yourself with, all of your body and, calling forth the pieces that you have some struggle around, and also the pieces that you're loving, and really getting comfortable with seeing yourself in that way. And then maybe getting naked, and then maybe going deeper and looking at your pussy, and then maybe taking it a step further and actually self-pleasuring, in front of the mirror. And at each step, being really curious about what thoughts are coming to the forefront of your mind. Are they yours? A lot of it's not really ours. It's actually a belief that, we had a past lover that said something about our bodies and we've taken that on and made it our truth. Or it's something from society that we've taken on and made it our truth. It's something from porn of how our bodies should look or feel, and we've taken that on as well. So that's one like practice that you could see that you could elevate. There's lots of other different ways to, move in this space, and it's really individual. It depends on the person and where they're at and what I would suggest, but that specific piece can do so many different things, and has done a lot for me as well.
Yeah, I love that you spoke into that, like really meeting yourself where you're at, because in a recent embodiment session that I taught, I, have as part of embodiment work, it is about women getting comfortable with being in their bodies and feeling the sensations in their bodies. And part of that is touching their own bodies. And it's not even necessarily in a self-pleasure way. It's literally like bringing loving touch to, running your fingertips through your hair or across your shoulder, and like touching your breasts and touching your belly. And even in that alone, because as a culture, we have so much trauma around sex and our bodies and all of that, like that in itself can bring up, stuff that's been under the surface. I had a woman who just through that practice alone was like, I realized that I thought I didn't like touch from other people, but it was actually that I feel unworthy of touch. And that's simply through the exploration of like a simple embodiment practice where she didn't have to go into a self-pleasure practice to find that. And that helped her to connect more intimately with her husband, and now like hug him more and hold his hand more and, feel worthy of being touched by him. And so there's so much that happens when we go into these practices. And a lot of times we don't expect it. Like there's such deep layers here for us to look at that, is really beautiful. So I love that you talked about, really meeting yourself where you're at in your nervous system. And there isn't like a better or a worse of like, you should be further along or you should be doing these advanced practices. It's like, where are you at right now? And what is your next layer to uncover?
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of the tools in Tantra are actually very, very, very simple. Even the three basic tools of Tantra are sound, breath, and movement. All three of these are meant to help you drop into the present moment and help you release anything that's no longer serving you. And it's interesting because this is something that like is a part of any workshop or one-on-one that I'm doing. And we'll do like a little opening meditation that's just around like make some sound, like moan, breathe loudly, cry, like anything's on the table. And it's like people are so afraid to even just take up that space and make a sound because we've been conditioned that our emotions are not okay and that they're wrong and it's not safe to express them. So to have a safe space just to make sound and noise, like that alone is so powerful. And then once you pair that with sexuality, once you pair that with your pleasure, there's just so much more available. I had a woman come to me who whenever she would have penetrative sex, it just hurt. Like she couldn't enjoy it. It would just like, she would immediately become so contracted. And so the work that I did with her was around just like breathing and relaxing and softening. And suddenly she could have these, not just, orgasms and pleasure from penetration. She could actually have full body orgasms as well because she was moving the energy and using the sound as a tool and using her body to lean in. Like it's incredible. Our bodies know what to do. It's just letting go of all of the beliefs around what is okay in our expression.
Yeah. And I'm curious about your experience with this, but I'll share some of my personal experience. Like the more expressed that I've become within myself and the more comfortable that I've become with my own like body and even vocal expression, like when I'm making love with my partner, and this is like this partner and previous partners, like there's something really powerful that opens up for them where it's like, you being in your fullest expression allows them to be in a more full expression for it themselves. And like, I feel like it just creates this energy cycle or this loop. And I feel like there's so much more available with like experimentation and connection when your partner can hear and feel where you're at when you're having sex. So I'm curious about your experience with that.
Yeah, for sure. I find that women in their full expression, whether it be sexually or emotionally or otherwise, is really an initiation for men. It's a really big initiation. And, you know, not every man is like there yet, but also the possibility of like planting a seed too. Um, but yeah, it's definitely an initiation for men to be in that full expression and to bring more of yourself to the practice. It also, when we're in our full expression, we're also communicating. And I think the reason why there's a lot of moments where our boundaries are crossed sexually or we're feeling like we're not getting what we want is because we're actually not communicating with our bodies. We're not sounding, we're not leaning in, we're just shutting down and freezing. And men don't know what to do with that. So there's also the extra added benefit of being in the energy of like, I'm showing with my body what I need and what I desire. And I'm also a big fan of actually communicating directly. But that's another, side benefit, etc. My husband specifically has said, he's like, I've never had anyone that's like this expressive and it's so helpful to me. Like at first it was like, whoa, like that's a lot. But then it like now he's like, this is the best, the best. I'm so clear with
Yeah.
you.
I feel like that's so important what you just shared. Like being in your fullest expression isn't just about being in like oh my God, this feels amazing and this feels good. And it's not just only about the pleasure, but it's also about expressing like your boundaries, your desires, what's feeling good, what's not feeling good. And I feel like that's so important. That is part of how we create deeper safety and intimacy, even for our partners to know what we like, what we don't like, what feels good, what doesn't feel good. Like, I think really shifting out of the paradigm, which we are doing, which is like, oh, pleasure is for men. And it's like, no, like, if something's not feeling good for you while you're, if we're talking in the context of sex or even in relationship, it's like expression is also about speaking your truth and being able to communicate what feels good and what doesn't feel good.
It's so true. And it's also important to recognize that pleasure is an altered state of consciousness. So when you're aroused, you have all of these chemicals in your brain that are taking you to an altered place, similar to how you would be, taking any type of plant medicine or alcohol. Those things also alter your consciousness. And so when we recognize that once we're actually in a sexual situation and we are turned on, it can be very hard to communicate our desires and to even know what they are or like our boundaries. And so I actually really recommend people before they even go on a date, get clear on what your boundaries are, what your non-negotiables are. And if you feel like things are going to go that way, communicating them before you even get in the bedroom. And this can be like, it sounds, I think for a lot of people that haven't done this before, it sounds really edgy and really scary. But I've done it lots and lots of times. And at first it was very edgy, but most dudes are like, this is so cool. Thank you. Because they feel more empowered to give you a good experience. And then as a woman, you feel safer. The biggest orgasm killer is being in our minds, being worried like, oh my God, has he been tested recently? I don't want to get an STD. I hope he uses a condom. Like he's going closer to my ass. I really don't like to be, and then just like spiraling in your head, and then you can't be in your body and actually enjoy what's available. So there's tools in my podcast as well for how to have those conversations in a sexy way and like what I recommend actually talking about. But yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that is important too is having these conversations outside of the bedroom too, right?
Yeah.
So I love that you talked about, especially if it's a new partner, like, hey, this is what I am available for. And also when you're with your partner, like talking about, what's feeling good, what's not feeling good if stuff comes up for you and it doesn't like have to happen in the bedroom. So I feel like the communication around around sex is so important, and it is such an edge, but it does create that true deep intimacy when you're able to communicate that. And it keeps men, like, they don't have to guess, they don't have to wonder, right? Like
Yeah.
they know where you're at, which is really empowering for them too.
Yeah, it's obviously amazing in early relationships to do this. I actually, like a few years ago, or I guess more than a few years ago now, I set the New Year's intention that I wasn't going to have sex with anyone until I had these conversations, like until we talked about, at the bare minimum, um, desires, fears, and boundaries. Uh, and so that like changed my life. And so if anyone wants to take that on as their, it's still close enough to the new year. That really changed things for me. But in long-term relationships too, it's really powerful because especially women, we're cyclical, as I'm sure you talk about all the time on this podcast, and our bodies are different every day, which is really exciting. I think men really love variety. And so to lean into the fact that we're cyclical and it's almost like having a different woman in bed every day is really juicy and empowering. And I notice, you know, when I'm near my ovulation, it's like I'm more willing to be kinkier and to try new things. And then there are other parts of my cycle, you know, near like when I'm like bleeding, I feel very intuitive, and I tend to have the most like earthy, like I don't know, like channeled orgasms, cosmic orgasms maybe. And so being able to like lean into that is really juicy and powerful as well. And even for men too, like men are often out, they're working, stress, different things can affect like what they're available for as well. So it happens very often in long-term relationships that someone is rejected or like their desire isn't received, and like we tend to make up a story about what it means and take it personally, when in reality, when we can have these conversations and like get more clear about, I'm not available for this, but here's what else is on the table, then the intimacy can continue and not have that more long-term effect of like slowly having this like dying sexuality in your relationship, which many people have, right?
Yeah, so key. And yeah, one of the things that my vision for long-term partnership and the new paradigm of long-term partnership is that our sex actually gets to get better over
Yes.
time, and that it gets to expand and, you know, just become even more connected and juicier. And I think that we have this narrative, and because of, you know, what we've seen modeled to us, that it's this idea that it actually goes down over time. And I'm sure there are different seasons in life
Mm-hmm.
where maybe when you have children or when there's grief or something, where the frequency of how often you're having sex changes, right? But overall, I feel like the trajectory and the vision that I have for the new paradigm of relationships is that it gets to improve and continue to get better as we get older too.
I'm right there with you, and there is evidence that it's possible as well, for sure. And Tantra has
Yeah.
been the thing that has helped create that reality for me and for my husband as well. We've been together for 2 years, so not that long, but in other partnerships as well, I had similar experiences where it just got better.
Yes, amazing. So I feel like that's like the best note that we could possibly end on.
It just gets better. I
Just
love
gets
that.
better. Yes, holding the vision for that. And yeah, I know that you have some really amazing offerings coming up. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about what's happening in your world and how our listeners can connect with you.
Yeah, there are so many ways to play. But the two things that I'm most excited about right now, one, I have a book coming out probably in the summer called Sacred Sex Ed. I'm very excited about that. And then I'm also leading an initiation called The Pleasure Priestess, and it's for devotional women who are longing to embody their desire and harness their sensual energy and become a leader in love and really inspire others to awaken to this creative energy that, you know, connects the spiritual world and the physical world. And it's a whole year, and it includes some in-person things. And I've got some awesome guest teachers, and I'm feeling really excited about it.
Sounds incredible. I'm really excited for all the women who are going to be going on that journey with you. And where can our listeners find out more about your offerings and about your work?
Yeah, so pretty much everything is at Talk Tantra to Me. That's the Instagram at Talk Tantra to Me. The podcast is Talk Tantra to Me, talktantra2me.com. Find me at Talk Tantra to Me.
We'll link all of that in the show notes.
Great.
And yeah, it's been such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much. And yeah, again, I love following you online. I love the work that you're doing in the world, and I'm excited for my community to get to be in your world now too.
Same, same. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks again for joining me here on The Feminine Frequency. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit subscribe and share it with a friend. For more inspiration, empowerment, and wisdom, come on over and follow me on Instagram at Amy Natalie Co. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and we'll see you in the next video.